It's 1980. You and your family are moving into a new apartment inside a recently built complex. You're excited because it has an operating elevator and even running hot water. It's so modern compared to all the other old, dilapidated buildings in the area. You get your keys and, over time, you settle into your new home with your family. Little do you know, this building will soon take everything you hold dear away from you. This is the real-life horror story of the families who lived and died in Apartment 85. After only a year of living in Apartment 85, Building 7 of a new complex in Kramatorsk, Ukraine, an 18-year-old girl who was the oldest child of a family became severely sick. Not long later, it was discovered that she had leukemia, a type of cancer that targets the body's blood-forming tissues, including the bone marrow and lymphatic system, which results in an excess production of abnormal white blood cells. This reduces the body's ability to combat infections, clot blood, and transport oxygen, leading to symptoms such as fatigue, frequent infections, and easy bruising. Like with many other forms of cancer, there is no cure. And though the 5-year survival rate has increased today to be 66.7%, back in 1981, it was much lower at just under 40%. Sadly, for this family, the odds were stacked against them, and the young woman in Apartment 85 passed away within just a few months of being diagnosed. Then, not even a full year had passed before the family's younger son, just 16 years old, received the same diagnosis and passed away just as suddenly. And shockingly, without time to recover from grief, the mother too mysteriously lost her life to the very same cancer as her children. But how could this happen? Even though cases of leukemia being hereditary are very rare, doctors declared it to be the family's genetics. But those who heard of the family's tragic series of events found them too strange to be that simple. And with a number of people residing in close proximity to the family also becoming sick, residents of the building dubbed Apartment 85 the Cursed Apartment. And it seems the superstitions and gossip weren't taken seriously enough, because after the remaining family members moved out, reeling from the death of the mother, City Council was given the recommendation to move a new family into the now empty apartment. Though the exact date of when this new family moved in is unknown, it was soon made clear that they would share a similar fate to their predecessors. In 1987, the eldest son of the new residents became extremely ill and passed away not long after. And during the funeral that the family held for him, their younger son was fighting for his life, lying in critical condition at the hospital. Both boys had, you guessed it, leukemia. The father, now armed with evidence from his own sons as well as those who lived in the apartment before them, pushed for an investigation into exactly what was happening. But just like how most government work goes, it took a long time before anything was actually done. Finally, 2 years later, in 1989, radiologists entered Apartment 85 with their usual arsenal of radiation gauges to test radiation levels and air samples within the home. Before they even entered through the front door, the experts measured radiation levels 10 times higher than normal. Levels so high that they needed to go back to the headquarters of civil defense to get equipment that could get a better reading of just how much radiation they were dealing with. And the farther they got into the apartment, the higher the readings became. When they entered the room where the children had slept, the source of the multiple sudden onset cancer diagnoses became abundantly clear. The highest levels were coming from the wall right next to the bed of the boy who had most recently passed away. At just a meter up from the ground, the reading on the dosimeter froze at 200 roentgens per hour. For reference, a single dose of 400 would be lethal. Radiologist and physician Nikolai Savchenko, who was at the inspection, said many people were saved by the fact that the dose was stretched over time. Even with the location of the radiation found, there were still a lot of questions, like what exactly was inside the wall emitting such shockingly high amounts of radiation? And how on earth did it get there? But before they could figure that out, they had to remove the section of wall in question very, very carefully, and ASAP. Lead plates were first nailed into the section of the wall in order to protect the workers. Then, the wall was delicately removed from the building and brought to the Kiev Institute of Nuclear Research on a truck whose driver was also protected by lead plates and a lead-lined apron. Nikolai Savchenko said, "Before and after the construction workers worked in the apartment, we took swabs to exclude the possibility of the presence of radioactive powder. There was no such thing. Everything was clean." The gamma background in the apartments became the same as on the street. This proved that the source of radiation had been removed with the wall and that the apartment and building as a whole were finally safe and free of any radioactivity. All in all, there were 17 people, aside from those who tragically passed away in the years prior, who were affected by the doses of radiation emitting from apartment 85. So what was inside the children's bedroom wall emitting that ridiculous amount of radiation in the first place? A couple theories come into play. The first being that somehow a piece of cobalt-60, a man-made radioactive material created in nuclear reactions that emits harmful gamma rays, had found its way into the wall. However, due to cobalt-60's 5.3-year half-life and the building being 9 years old, the radioactivity would have been halved almost twice over by now, which didn't match the radiation levels they were detecting. A much more possible culprit was cesium-137, a radioactive metal that emits strong gamma and beta radiation 4 times more penetrating than X-rays. It also has a 30-year half-life, which aligned with the levels experts were getting from inside apartment 85. And it turns out that after researchers at the Nuclear Research Institute in Kiev broke into the wall itself, an 8mm by 4mm capsule containing the radioactive cesium-137 was discovered within the concrete, one with a very distinct serial number etched into it. A serial number that would lead back in time to the Kerensky stone quarry in the Donetsk region in the late 1970s, where one tiny mishap forever reshaped the lives of those who would come to live in apartment 85 a decade later. You see, quarry workers, even today, measure the density of materials using a device called a densometer, with a radioisotope level gauge that just so happens to contain an extremely small vial of cesium-137. And at this quarry in question, a vial from one of these gauges was lost and a search was conducted to recover it. But due to the workload at the time, the search concluded quickly, and that tiny radioactive vial became lost in a sea of stone and gravel, never to be seen again. That is, until it was inadvertently used to make the concrete that formed the bedroom wall of the 85th apartment in the 7th building of a modern new complex and went on to leak enough radioactivity to kill 2 children, 2 adults, and make 17 others sick. In the end, the case has set an example to others of the precautions that need to be taken when dealing with such lethal materials. In fact, as recently as January 2023, this lesson was put to the test when a similar radioactive vial used in a measuring device was lost on an 870-mile stretch of highway in Australia near the country's west coast. The device containing the vial was taken from the town of Newman to Perth for repair, but when it was opened at its destination, its protective packaging was broken and the dangerous piece of material was missing. Experts feared that it had the potential to become stuck within the wheel of a vehicle and in turn expose the occupants of the vehicle with high levels of radiation over a long period of time, much like the families in apartment 85. The search, which was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, was thankfully successful, and the deadly vial was located after a week by a vehicle with special radiation detection equipment. Goes to show how handling even the tiniest amount of radioactive materials needs extreme caution, lest you want to make an atomic mistake that could irradiate trouble. And if you enjoyed this video and want more videos like it, then hit the subscribe button. That way you'll know when we upload our next video, and you'll help out our channel a ton, huh? That seems like a lot. Evacuate immediately. Report to government. Yeah, you're probably right. Must be faulty. Anywho, if you're up for another crazy story, try this one about a woman who evaporated into thin air with only her left leg and shrunken skull left behind.